Welcome, everyone. My name's Ingemar Hunnings, and I'm delivering this free webinar on the SQE, the QWE, and exemptions. So we have people from all over the world, from all walks of life, qualified and unqualified lawyers. So welcome to you all. The format of the evening is going to be that I'll talk about these topics for about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. And then there'll be a long Q&A session. When I say long, it's usually long. It depends on how many questions you ask. So a little bit about myself. As I said, my name is Ingemar Hunnings. I am a solicitor. I practiced as a solicitor in a law firm for 24 years. I was an equity partner for 14. I was a member of the board. I ran a department of 60 litigators. So that's my professional career in a nutshell. I now run HCL, Hunnings Consultancy. We're a management consultancy helping mostly law firms, some other businesses as well, with the business of running their business. We also help a lot of people who want to qualify through the SQE route. So that's us in a nutshell. I got into this because one of our law firm clients was actually a firm of paralegals, and the owner of that wanted to qualify as a solicitor. There was no solicitor in their organization who could confirm his qualifying work experience under the SQE route. But the rules, which were still being written at that time, this was July 2020, were saying that you could reach out to an external solicitor to confirm your qualifying work experience. For example, if there wasn't a solicitor in your organization. So he reached out to me. That caused me to research this, work closely with the SRA to work out what they actually meant by what they'd written. And I developed a service helping people by confirming their qualifying work experience as an external confirming solicitor, which we've done for over 80 people now around the world. That's then dragged me into the area of helping people who are already qualified as lawyers with the SQE2 exemption applications. So that's a little bit of background and how I got into that. Now then, what is the SQE? And so let's get into that question. I'm going to bring this up as a little piece of assistance in here. So the SQE is the route for qualifying as a solicitor of England and Wales. It's taking over from the old LPC route, and it came into force in September 2021. So it's been around now for a couple of years. Quite a lot of people have sat the exams. Quite a few have qualified now as well. It's made up of 4 elements. So you have to have a degree or a degree equivalent. You have to sit and pass the SQE1 and the SQE2 exams, unless you get exemption from one of those. And I'll talk about exemptions later on. You have to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then I've written sign a declaration of good character. There's a little bit more to it than that. They do DBS checks to make sure you haven't got a criminal record, and identity checks and things like that. And you have to have a degree or degree equivalent, different from the LPC route because it doesn't have to be a law degree. It can be any degree or a degree equivalent. The SRA does not require you to do a converter course. Training companies may encourage or insist that you do. That's a commercial issue between you and them. It's not required by the SRA. It may be that doing a converter course from a non-law degree will help you pass the exams, but that's just a question of what you choose to do. Okay, so let me move this across here. The SRA will require you to validate your degree. And there is information on the SRA website, but there's also information here on our website where I'm trying to digest what they're saying. Most of the time they use a company called Atlantic Data for this process. And so there are links on here as to how you can do that. There is a charge. So there we go. There's that. Validating your degree. So you can do that through your My SRA profile on the SRA website. And then they're going to be using this company here for validating your degree or degree equivalent. So they're trying to be as flexible as possible. Now then, the exams themselves. What is the SQE exam? There are 2 exams, the SQE1 and the SQE2. And I'm going to go through both of them. People may be able to get some exemptions from these. I'll talk about exemptions later on. Okay. So the SQE1 tests you on your knowledge of the law. It's a multiple choice exam. There are 2 exams actually to it, and they call them FLK, Functioning Legal Knowledge, each of 180 multiple choice questions. Now, this is tough. It's tough also because the time allowed is quite short, so you've got to move swiftly on from one to the other. Often there are 2 answers that could be correct. It's very granular. I've heard someone tell me that it's down to the level of, in this scenario of this property transaction, which part of which form would you fit in? So really granular. It's covering these areas of law. Okay. Bizarrely, it doesn't cover family law, but hey, that's the way it is. I have asked the SRA twice in a webinar and they refuse to answer. It is what it is. Okay. Now you can sit this in the Pearson View Centres, which in the UK are used for doing your driving theory test. You can sit them in the UK and abroad. There are Pearson View test centres around the world, and I haven't got on this screen, but there is possibly, even I put it to the blog relatively recently, where there we go. Most recent blog I've done, where may I sit the SQE exams? I think I put a link to the SRA page, which they keep up to date with, where the SQE1 exams can be sat. Now, all the people who sit the SQE1, roughly about 55% pass. Yeah, it is tough. But there we go. Now, the SQE2 exam cannot apply for until you have passed your SQE1 or been given an exemption. The SQE2 tests you on the knowledge and the application of the knowledge, okay, into real life scenarios. They give you 16 real life scenarios, 12 are written, 4 are oral, okay, covering these areas of law, but also covering the skills as well. And they want to see really if they let you loose on the public, if you'll be safe. So they're testing you to the level of newly qualified solicitor. And if there's a certain amount of subjectivity to this with the examiners, the written tests can be sat, I believe, in the Pearson View Centres, and therefore you don't have to travel to the UK for those. But the oral parts, you do have to travel to England, actually, England and Wales. They're sat in London, Manchester, and Cardiff in Wales. Of the people who sit the SQE2 exams, roughly about 77% pass. Okay, so that's the SQE2 exams. Now, while we're talking about exams, there's information obviously on the SRA website, and there's information here as well as to when the exams actually are. So you have to book in for them. They're administered by a company called Kaplan. Now, we do not provide training, but I do have a page on our website listing the main training providers that I've come across who are not universities. There's too many universities. The SRA has a list. This is just an information page where I've tried to summarize a little bit of information about the provider, an indication of price as far as I can work out, but please do check, this may not be up to date, and their website. Now, if you're only taking the SQE2 or just the SQE1, it won't be the full price. You will need to talk with the providers yourself direct about it. But anyway, that's a resource page for you there for the SQE training providers that I've come across. And I do update these when I come across other ones. So there's another one I've come across just today, and I'll be putting that on over the next couple of days, certainly by the end of the weekend. So the next thing I want to come on to is the third element. Let's go back to here. We looked into the degrees, we looked at the exams. Now then, if you're not already qualified, then you will have to have 2 years full-time equivalent qualifying work experience confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. You are exempt from that if you are already qualified as a lawyer in a jurisdiction, any jurisdiction. Okay. For those people who are not, which will be the majority of the people applying to seeking to become solicitors, you need your QWE. So let me go through and explain what QWE is, because it causes a lot of confusion. So qualifying work experience. What is full-time equivalent? Let's start off with that. Full-time equivalent will be down to the judgment of the confirming solicitor. Again, the solicitor has to be regulated by the SRA. So an Australian solicitor won't be any good. There needs to be that line of regulation from the SRA so that they can discipline us if we use our position. Okay. Full-time equivalent down to the judgment of the confirming solicitor. When I'm doing this, I say 30 to 35 hours plus a week. But it may be that the view of the confirming solicitor is different. The one that you're talking with, that's up to them. No point telling them what I say. It is up to them because they have to be happy. They can justify themselves to the SRA. So it will turn out to be a question of maths. You don't have to do it in one big chunk like a training contract. You can gather this over a period of time. So what is qualifying work experience? It is the provision of legal services. Okay. So when I'm talking with people about qualifying work experience, I want to know whether it fits in that definition. Is it instead the provision of financial services, or the provision of administrative services, or the provision of marketing services? It cannot be academic, just so you work as a lecturer, that won't count. Your studies at university doesn't count. That's not the provision of legal services. For the provision of legal services, in my view, you have to have a client to whom you are providing the services. But critically, that does include your employer. So you can be in-house legal and providing legal services to them. That is perfectly okay. And people are providing legal services in all sorts of ways, not just as in-house or as in a private law firm. So the SRA themselves gave the example of the citizen's advice, where you might be an advisor giving advice out to people on the law. A critical thing about qualifying work experience is that you, as the aspiring solicitor, control your acquisition of this. It's no longer in the power and control of the law firm as it was with a training contract, if you could get one under the LPC route. And you will have up to 4 placements within which to accumulate your minimum 2 years full-time equivalent. You can reach back in time as far as you want with your qualifying work experience, so long as you can find someone to confirm it. It does not need to be done in a law firm. It does not need to be done in England and Wales. It does not need to be done in English and Welsh law. Qualifying work experience is all about acquiring the competencies that the SRA says that you should have as an English solicitor. And effectively, the QWE is preparation for the SQE2 exam. Okay, so you can acquire and get confirmed your QWE before you start your exams, during your exams, or after your exams. So long as it is done before you're applying for admission, that's the only requirement really of that, as far as that's concerned. I want to do a little bit about apprenticeships. This is only relevant to people who are in England. Wales has something similar, so it's different for Scotland. And if you're overseas, outside of those countries or nations, it won't count because this is something specifically relating to the taxpayer in England and Wales. The SRA has been very careful to design the SQE to fit within the government's apprenticeship scheme, which has been around for decades, but now for the first time, lawyers can make use of that. It is true that you can join as an apprentice straight after school, say at 16 or something, but critically with the SQE, you could join as a graduate apprentice. And what this will mean is you'll be an employee of the company, the firm, and they will then put you on as an apprentice with one of the approved training providers. The only two that I know of at the moment, of all the training providers, is the University of Law and BPP, which is more an accident of history rather than any comment upon the quality of the other organizations. And what will happen is the University of Law or BPP will organize everything. They will receive the payment direct from the government. For the aspiring solicitor, all of their exam fees and their training fees will then be covered. They won't have to pay them. So it's a massive benefit to the aspiring solicitor. 95% will be paid by the government, 5% by the employer. But the employer could reach out to an organization which is big enough to be paying the apprenticeship levy and ask them if they have any credits left over, in which case, if they can get a credit, that will then cover their 5% of it. So that's roughly how it works. I've got this up on our website. I've distilled the information I've got into this page here. The apprenticeship support service that I'm highlighting here, there's their number, 7 days a week, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Really helpful. And the pages I'm putting up, I will put a post up on LinkedIn tomorrow with these on here and the links to the articles. If you're someone who is not on LinkedIn, then please email me direct and I'll send you the links to all these resources that I'm talking about and showing here as well. Okay, so that's apprenticeships. I'm a great fan of that. I think it's massively good news for aspiring solicitors. It's actually good news for law firms as well. They've got some leverage here to keep someone with them for longer, because under this new scheme, the paralegal has much more power and control and can shift much more easily to another firm if they want to. If they're in under an apprenticeship, then why would they? Because they're getting all their fees paid for them. So you keep them for longer as a law firm. But there's much more parity of power, whereas under the LPC, it was very much the dominant employer and then the minions. Let me move on now to exemptions, which I know that certainly the people from overseas are desperate for me to talk about. First of all, the easy one, SQE1. If you've passed your LPC, you can put that in as credit against the SQE1 exam, and usually you will be granted exemption. I don't think it's absolutely automatic, but I think it's pretty rare if someone is not granted exemption from the SQE1 exam, but you will have to sit the SQE2. A general point about granting exemptions, from what I've heard as feedback, and it's not a definite rule, but it's just the feedback that I've heard, the SRA seem to be unwilling to grant exemption from both exams. And I've heard of people who've been granted exemption from one, let's say the SQE1, then because they're a foreign qualified lawyer, they have applied for exemption from SQE2. They've had their SQE1 exemption revoked and been granted their SQE2 exemption. It generally seems to be a rule that the SRA wants you to sit one of those exams. It's just my experience there. There's something similar to the equivalent means that existed under the LPC. It's an arduous task. You've got to get together a huge dossier of paperwork to show and really persuade the SRA that you have extensive experience across all the practice areas covered in the exams, if you're going to be able to persuade them to grant you an exemption. So it's a huge job putting it together. You've got to pay £600, I believe. I might be out of date with that figure. And then wait 6 months for them to consider it all and tell you whether they grant you that exemption. Not something we help with. Good luck to you if you're going to go down that route. SQE2. Okay. There's our consulting services exemption for a QWE external confirmation service, but I'm going to go to the SQE2 exemptions. I've written foreign lawyers. It's not just foreign lawyers. It can be people who are qualified, for example, as a notary here in England, but it's mostly foreign lawyers. A lot of information about this on here. The exemption from SQE2 exam is only available to people who are already qualified as lawyers. And there is a form that you need to fill in, which is less complicated than it looks. You will have to fill in sections 1 to 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are basically saying who you are, where you're qualified, what rights does the qualification give you, are you ethical, that sort of thing. So everyone has to fill that in. 5 and 6 are for applying for exemption from SQE1. And as I said, good luck to you. There's a whole pile of information that you need to gather together with that. Then 7 and 8 are to do with applications for exemption from SQE. It says it here. Let me go through this. You can apply. There are some countries where you have been granted automatic exemption, Brazil, for example. So that you could just apply for through your MySRA profile. But for the rest, it's an individual application. Section 7A is where it is a mandatory part of your qualification that you have 2 years professional legal experience. South Africa is an example, a bit like the old LPC route in England and Wales. So the SRA is basically piggybacking on your qualification in that country. And so you then basically tick that, you put some information in and pay the fee, send the form in. They will check with your regulatory body. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Section 7B is where you have gained 2 years professional legal work experience after qualification. Now, it does not have to be done in the UK. It will be done most normally in the jurisdiction where you qualify, but it doesn't have to be in the jurisdiction where you qualified. This is more not about your knowledge of English law, because you would have demonstrated that in the SQE1 exam. It's about the soft skills, the fact that you are already a practitioner, you're doing stuff, okay? You will need to have that, which can be gathered in more than one block, let's say, a minimum of 2 years professional legal work experience. And you will need to provide the SRA through your My SRA profile with the form, the fee, a certificate of good standing gathered from which you obtained from your local bar or law society. You'll also need to get a signed letter of reference from your supervisor. And maybe you need to get more than one if you've got more than one block of time that you're cobbling together to get your minimum 2 years professional legal work experience. Now, that letter of reference needs to have certain things in it. It's pretty straightforward. And I've got here a guidance note on that. Again, that is on the SRA website, but I've tried to make it really simple there. And there you can download the actual application form. Of course, again, it's downloadable from the SRA website. But that's what you need to put in there. Now, if the supervisor is a lawyer, you should get a certificate and submit a certificate of good standing from their local bar, or they'll get it and give it to you. If they're not a lawyer, and they don't have to be a lawyer, then you ought to explain in the reference letter why they're appropriate to be supervising you. If they are a professional, then it's good to get some proof of their qualifications and submit that. Now, the SRA may well go back and forth. They may check with the supervisors and such, but that's what they want. Section 7C is where it's a mixture of A and B. You've got some professional legal work experience gained as a mandatory part of your qualification, and then some other making up a total of 2 years. It varies from country to country. I've been asked before by people in India, I've got 6 months of internship, legal work experience from before I qualified. But I think in India, there's a mandatory requirement of 2 or 3 months. So it's only the mandatory requirement that is going to be this in here. So you're going to have in 7C your 2 months or 3 months, whatever it is. If I can't quite remember the exact detail in India, as your part of your qualification. And then the remaining, let's say 3 months. So the remaining 21 months is post-qualification in here with the supervisor reference letter. Okay. So that's 7C. Section 8 is for situations where either you don't have a cumulative 2 years professional work experience fitting in 7A, B, and C, or your qualification doesn't give you the full same practice rights as a solicitor of England and Wales. And a big group of people who are affected by this is people who've qualified in ex-Soviet Union countries, for want of a better way of grouping you together. Russia, Ukraine, even Poland, Azerbaijan, Georgia, for example. And in those jurisdictions, you are a lawyer and able to practice once you pass your law degree. But it doesn't give you some practice rights, I think, in criminal courts and perhaps some higher civil courts. For that, you have to take a further exam to become an advocate. If you're an advocate, then Section 8 doesn't concern you. You're dealing with 7A, B, and C. Okay. But if you're not, then you're into Section 8 here. Now, in Section 8, you have to fill in the form, which is quite a lot more involved, and put together a dossier of paperwork to try and persuade the SRA why they should give you an exemption, because you've got that specific expertise which you can demonstrate. Much more difficult. Now, we don't help people with Section 8. It's far more involved than these in here, but we do provide some assistance with reviewing the reference letter and the application if people are going through Section 7. So Section 8, that is a bit of a barrier for people from those jurisdictions. The default position for the SRA is sit the exam. So that is always their default position. So if you can't get an exemption, it's not the end of the world. It just means you have to study and sit and pass the exam. Okay. QLTS. no longer relevant. That finished when the SQE came in September 2021. There was a transitional period where you could trade in your MCT pass if you hadn't passed the OSCE. The last opportunity to do that was, I think, has just finished, the October sitting of the SQE2. So now we can say quite clearly, anyone who's saying, oh, I passed my MCT, but I didn't finish and pass my OSCE, can I apply for an exemption from the SQE2 trading in my MCT? The answer is no. So if you're a foreign qualified lawyer, you apply in exactly the same way as all the other foreign qualified lawyers. I've just gone through all that there. Okay, one further point I just wanted to make, which is just emphasizing GDL. If you've done it, fine, jolly good, but it's no longer required for the SQE. Would be for the LPC. Now, people who started their degree after September 2021 will not be able to sit the LPC. So the LPC is on its way out. Now, I can't comment on what the employment prospects are for people who are taking the SQE rather than the LPC. People can be hesitant about change, but you know you're good. Employers will always hire on experience, so try and get good experience wherever you can. But there we go. So I've talked for a long time giving out information about this. So what I'm going to do now is turn to the questions. Okay, so I'll start working my way through the chat in here. And just bear with me as I just work my way through these. And welcome, greetings, very nice to see from South Africa, John Good. Okay, Alina, this is the first question. Would you recommend for someone just opt for a course provider to study like Barbary for SQE or get enrolled at a university like University of Law? Which route gives a higher rate of clearing the exams? So really you're asking for guidance on which of the training providers to pick. That is impossible for me to do. I don't have the information to say which is better than the other. In fact, there is no data out there. The SRA has not shared any data. I would say anyways, it's very early days and it's such an individual thing. Each person learns in a different way and they have different circumstances as they work their way through. Some people are lucky enough to be funded by some of the big law firms. Some people are lucky enough to be put on as apprentices. Other people are self-funding whilst trying to raise a family and keep down a full-time job. It's going to vary hugely on that. Some of the traditional universities that used to offer the LPC, I think are offering the SQE, but of course now they don't set the exam themselves, which under the LPC they did. It's all administered centrally by the Kaplan for the SRA. So it's the same exam sat by everyone across the world. I've taken you to the page, let's see which one it was, training providers, where I have tried to list those that I can find. This is not the University of Law calls itself that, but it's not a university like Manchester University or Cambridge or Leicester University, that sort of thing. It used to be College of Law when I was training myself. But anyway, yeah, you can see the relative pricing as well. If you're self-funding, you might think twice before paying those sort of figures when there are cheaper options out there, but you're going to have to form your own opinion when looking through these as to which way of learning is going to work best. The other thing also is ask your peers. There are lots of groups out there, WhatsApp groups on LinkedIn and such like, where there are lots of people out there. Ask people what their experience is. And people who've gone through and passed the SQE1 can tell you what they thought on them. But remember, again, they only have their own personal perspective. So you're going to have to take a bit of a wide set of opinions, I would have thought, and look carefully yourself. Now you're grown up, you're making these decisions for yourself. Good luck with that. Sorry, I can't just endorse someone. That's not what we're at. Okay. Oyin, question from you. If you have worked in UK welfare rights for a number of years, does that exempt you? Doesn't exempt you from anything. No, it might be that welfare rights law, advising on the law there might count as qualifying work experience. that would be, you would need to find a solicitor, hopefully in the organization, but other than that, someone external perhaps, who will then say, yes, they are of the opinion that it is qualifying work experience, the provision of legal services, and then they can confirm you to the SRA. But what I would say on that is, just because you're giving advice like the citizen's advice doesn't necessarily mean that it will be qualifying work experience. My personal view is that if someone is a debt advisor, that's providing financial services. It's not providing legal services. It's got to be related to the law, okay, rather than just the fact you're giving advice. Next question, Shanalaya, if I pronounced that correctly. So, would working in a Big Four and providing clients with tax consultancy services be considered by the SRA for QWE? So you're talking about working in an accountancy firm. We're working in an accountancy firm providing tax consulting services, tax advice, be considered QWE. First thing I would say is, it's not the SRA who's considering it. You're not submitting any paperwork to them. It's the solicitor regulated by the SRA who makes that decision. Okay. And they have to be ready to justify their decision to the SRA. Now, I think that it is unlikely, but it would depend, because certainly the Big Four do in their work stray into areas which would be the provision of legal services. So it really is down to the individual circumstances of what is being done. But tax advice, I think not. That's a provision of financial services. I know that you could argue that it's financial legislation, but still, I think that's outside of what is in the contemplation of the SRA. But there may be circumstances within the Big Four and such like where someone is providing legal services. Indeed, I have worked and confirmed the QWE of some people, and it was actually legal services. So it wasn't tax advice. It was more on the legal side. So it really always boils down to the particular work that the person was doing. I hope that's of some help, Shanalaya. Carlo, hi. Can QWE done in the UK but for a Portuguese law firm count towards the 2 years? Carla, so you're really asking, can QWE be done which is not in English law? Is my understanding on that. And the answer is a categorical yes. The SRA is quite clear that the provision of legal services does not limit it to the provision of legal services in English law. It doesn't have to be done in England. It doesn't have to be done in English law, or indeed even in a law firm. So if you are providing legal services in Portuguese law, that is perfectly good. You just need to find then an SRA regulated solicitor who can confirm your qualifying work experience. And if all the lawyers in the firm are qualified only in Portugal, for example, you need to find someone external because they are not regulated by the SRA and could not confirm your qualifying work experience. Something, again, I can help with. I always offer a free, no obligation Zoom to go through to see whether it's appropriate for me to be involved and whether I think it's QWE before I even go any further in that Zoom, just to make sure that I'm not getting involved where it's inappropriate for me to do. I'm a person of last resort. Okay. The next one, Alina. How easy is it to find jobs after completing the SQE after the 2 years post-work visa for foreigners? Okay. Alina, you're asking about job prospects. I'm not a recruitment company. I'm a lawyer running a management consultancy, and we're not in recruitment. And you're getting down into some minutiae there about work visas for foreigners and such like, which I don't have a huge amount of technical knowledge. It is very much, I think, a commercial question. What's the job market? Would they hire you? If you're good enough and you have the right experience, then they're going to want to hire you. And it's also a question of who as well as what. But there's going to be some hesitancy, I think, with anything new, but people are going to have to hire people who are qualified through the SQE route because they won't have anyone else to hire. And quality will out anyway. So I really can't answer your question other than those sorts of things there. Trying and get experience as you're going through the exams in areas that you want to practice in. As I was saying to someone just yesterday, if you want to practice in IP law, she was doing housing work. I suggested she tried to find another job which will give her experience in intellectual property work. She'd done a degree in neuroscience, so she has technical expertise which she can evidence in the background. And then she had about 9 months QWE working for a well-known law firm in housing. She should then be looking, I think, to try and find a job doing as a paralegal, doing IP work, because that's going to give her experience, which makes her more employable in the area that she wants to go into. That's about as much as I can say. I hope that's some help. Okay. Moving on to the next question, Vasiliki. I've started studying since 1/9 and I will sit the exams in July 2022. Do you consider this time period sufficient for a successful outcome? I have no idea. Honestly, I haven't sat the SQE exams. I don't know how long you will need to study. It's going to depend on a number of factors. How much you already know, how good you are at sitting the exams, how much time you have to study, how good you are at studying, how good you are at sitting exams, just to pick a few points on there. Ask your peers who have actually sat the exams, and you've not said whether it's SQE1 or SQE2, but ask your peers what their experience was, okay? And pop the question on Reddit or into TikTok or something like that. I actually have a TikTok channel where we have videos about a QWE, and I'm going to put some SQE exemption ones on there soon as well. We're also on YouTube and such. I just pull that up. You can see, there we go. Lots and lots of videos about this or that. And yeah, ask around, join the groups, ask them. I'm sorry, I can't be more specific than that. Okay. Good, if I pronounced that correctly. As per the SQE exemption, if you are a qualified lawyer in a jurisdiction which is not listed on the country's list in the SRA, could you still apply for an individual exemption? In my case, I am qualified in Tunisia and Algeria with 5 years PQE in Tunisia in M&A corporate field. Good question, Kunuz. Of course, yes, you can apply for an individual exemption. Yes. All it means, and the SRA have been quite clear on that, if the country isn't listed, it just means that no one from that country is asked yet. Okay? Definitely. Do make the application, they'll consider it, and the conditions are exactly the same as I went through earlier for everyone else. It's the same for everyone. You've got 5 years post-qualification experience, so it's then a question of getting the right reference letters and such. I don't know if there's any mandatory pre-qualification legal work experience requirement in those countries, but you will. So you'll then have to look at the form, whereas it's this in here as to whether it's section 7A, 7B, or 7C that you're going to be filling in. But yeah, go for it. And as I said with this, if you don't get the exemption, the fallback is that you sit the exam. Sarah, could you please post the final recording of this webinar session on LinkedIn or send it via my LinkedIn, please? I'm not going to post it, broadcast it to the world, Sarah, but if you message me either on LinkedIn or directly by email, I will send you a copy. But it's just that the people who have come to this session have agreed that I can record. I'm not comfortable in just broadcasting it onto LinkedIn. Okay, so message me, Sarah, and you'll get a copy. Observer Michael Lee, what is the general length and level of detail recommended for a signed reference letter from a supervisor? Very good question. It doesn't have to be very long. A page and a half, 2 pages, that's about as much as you would need to do. Remember, you're not sending in evidence backing it up. It just needs to hit the main points that are required. Look at my guidance note down here for what needs to go in there. There are about 6, where has it gone? 6 points that you need to do, to put in there. And for those ones that I see that I review, usually a page, just over a page to 2 pages maximum really for that. Sophia, You raised your hand.
So, yeah, thank you for your session. I had a question about the LPC. If one was to start the LPC in 2024 and successfully complete it, can the SRA ask the individual to do this on one and not allow exemption? I had a secondary question following from this, but I'll let you answer this one.
My understanding with the LPC is that route is completely open to you. You can sit the LPC now, pass it, and then do a training contract if you can get one. Absolute fine, qualify, that's fine. Let's assume you started your degree before, I think it was September 2021. No problem for you going through that route at all. Or you could say, I can't find a training contract. I passed my LPC. Can I trade it in for against the SQE one and and then jump across to the SQE route? So QWE and the SQE2.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And off the back of that, so would you advise a graduate without a training contract to take the SQE or the LPC, or is that really just down to preference?
So if I just paraphrase the question, if you have graduated and passed the LPC but can't get a training contract, should you then jump across to the SQE route? It's your gamble. If you want to hold out for the training contract, that's cheaper for you, but you might not get one. At least now you have an option, whereas before you just could not qualify. Now you could say, hang it, I'm working as a paralegal. I've worked as a paralegal for 4 years whilst I'm trying to get this training contract. Why don't I get that confirmed? And then just sit the SQE2 exam. So you can at least move forward where you couldn't do so before. If you're just graduating and wondering what to do, if the LPC route is open to you, you have a choice. If it's not open to you, you've got to do the SQE route. The SQE route theoretically is cheaper than the LPC route. It's certainly more flexible. And yeah, that is whether you can get one of these golden training contracts. And that really is the point, large point as to why the SQE has been brought in, because it was such a bottleneck. People could not move forward. There were somewhere between 20 and 40% each year of people who passed their LPC who could not get a training contract. And that was just unfair. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That's been really helpful.
Samantha, for a foreign qualified lawyer with a foreign law degree from its own jurisdiction, plus a qualifying law degree in the UK, wow, is it likely that the person will qualify for exemptions? You didn't need to have the qualifying law degree in this country. You didn't even need to have a foreign law degree. You could have just had a foreign degree, but then qualified somehow or other in the foreign country. The key thing is foreign qualified lawyer. If you're a foreign qualified lawyer, you have the route open for you to apply for an exemption from the SQE2. Okay, that's the key thing. All these extra degrees are very good, but don't make any difference to that. It's being a foreign qualified lawyer that gives you that option to apply for the SQE2 exemption. Then you just need to meet the criteria that they're putting into here. I hope that helps a bit. Seems like you've got loads of qualifications. Yeah. Heppel. I work in-house legal as a senior paralegal, and my supervisor is an SRA regulated solicitor. You're sorted. Would my supervisor sign my QWE? I don't know. They can, but whether they would agree to is up to them. Now, the SRA is adamant that solicitors should not be holding back paralegals and refusing for no good reason to confirm their qualifying work experience. They made very clear, I was at the Colton Copper conference run by the SRA last month, and they made very clear in a meeting that solicitors should not be doing that. They should be confirming unless there's a good reason not to. And that has really to go to character, or if they think that the work that's being done is not qualifying work experience. And the definition is fairly broad, okay? The provision of legal services. If this is an SRA regulated solicitor, Heppel, then if they refuse, you could go to SRA ethics and say, I have a problem with my supervisor who is regulated by you and is refusing to confirm my qualifying work experience. I have blogged about this before. I should do a video just on it. It gets me really annoyed. because just because maybe the solicitor doesn't like change, doesn't like something new, is not a good reason for refusing to confirm someone's QWE. Sometimes there was a magic circle firm I was speaking with, a paralegal there, who are dragging their heels about confirming her QWE, just not replying. It's appalling. She's done her QWE. It's clearly QWE. They should be confirming it, which is a 2-minute job. Okay. Where it's someone in your own organization. Sorry, Heather, you're at the risk of putting me onto a hobby horse here, but whether she will, she or he, that is, I can't answer. Whether they should, yes, they should. It sounds like, depending upon what your work is, but if you are providing legal services to your employer, then it sounds as though they should. Hope there's some help. Happy to talk further, but it is going to be ultimately potentially going to the SRA, or you could say to the company, if you won't do it because you're uncomfortable, I can go to an external. Will your company, A, let the external see the work? B, will you give them feedback because an external has to get that information? Would you pay for their fees for doing the work? Or even if you don't do that, would you still allow me to private fund it? And if they're refusing all those options, you've got no option but to go to the SRA ethics and say, look, guys, what do we do here? Because they're basically sticking 2 fingers up to you and saying, I don't want to follow the rules of my regulator. And I'll stop talking there, Heather, before I get too worked up. Thank you. Jana, can my supervisor sign my QWE in the company for a period before he joined the company? I think that, first of all, your supervisor has to be an SRA regulated solicitor. I believe they could do, provided that they've taken evidence effectively from the people who supervised you at the company before they joined. I believe. I don't get involved in this because I am just an external confirming solicitor. So I'm just extrapolating from my thoughts on this. Probably best for that supervisor to just double check with SRA ethics or SRA admissions. They would be very happy to talk it through. There's no stigma in talking with the SRA. They're very helpful, but he may want to check that before doing that would be my advice there. Alina, one more question I need clarification on, and that is, you mentioned something around the lines that you cannot do an LPC after 2021, or something has become redundant after 2021. I just want to know what you were referring to. So the SQE came in September 2021. Up until that point, foreign qualified lawyers, the QLTS scheme to qualify as solicitors of England and Wales, that stopped when the SQE came in. Okay. There was a transition period up until this October when they could trade in the MCT, which was the first part of the QLTS route to qualifying as a solicitor, against the SQE1 exam and sit the SQE2. That has stopped. The last time anyone could sit the SQE2 in that transition period was October. Effectively, if you're a foreign qualified lawyer, whatever the circumstances now, you have to take the SQE route. Yes, you can apply for exemption for SQE2, but it's the full SQE route that you're following. Now, the LPC, if you are starting your degree, I believe, after September, October, let's say 2021, that's your degree before the LPC, then you have to follow the SQE route. But if you already started your degree beforehand, then you can go through the LPC route still, and that's fine. There is a long stop, I think, somewhere at the end of this decade, but I can't remember the exact date. But I hope that answers your question, Alina. There were 2 particular things in there. Good. You have a quick follow-up question. Do I get a QWE exemption if I have practiced for 5 years in Tunisian law firm, or do I still need to do it through an SRA regulated lawyer? Good. If you are a foreign qualified lawyer, or if you're qualified as a lawyer anywhere, you are exempt automatically from the SQE2 requirement. Full stop. If you are not exempt from the QWE requirement, then you can do your QWE anywhere in the world under any type of law, Okay, so long as it fits the definition of qualifying work experience, you can reach back in time as far as you want for it as well. But it's still your QWE has to be confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. The reason why is because they will then have the right to discipline that solicitor, that lawyer who's confirming the qualifying work experience, if they are abusing their position. So the qualifying work experience always has to be confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. But if you are a foreign qualified lawyer, for example, you are exempt automatically from the QWE requirement at all. I hope that clarifies that code. Just it. A non-qualified LLB graduate who completed 2 years training contract in South Africa, but not admitted to practice. Can I apply for any exemptions? No, because you're not a qualified lawyer, so SQE2 exemption is not available. You haven't passed the LPC, so SQE1 exemption isn't available, unless you can go through the equivalent means route, which means you've got to put together that huge dossier showing that you have great experience, the required experience to the level of a qualified solicitor in all of the areas she would have been examined. Okay, which is a bit of a job. That includes corporate, private client, criminal, including representing in the magistrates or going into the police station at least, contract law. Yeah, it's a pretty tall order. Okay, but your 2 years training contract would be qualifying work experience. So you probably got that bit nailed. You just need to have it confirmed to the SRA by an SRA regulated solicitor. You can sit the SQE1 exams in South Africa. You can sit the written part of the SQE2 exams in South Africa, because I believe there's a Pearson News Centre in South Africa that you can use. You would just have to travel to England or Wales for the oral part. And it might be by the time you got there, because you've got all those exams to sit and such like, the SRA has found a way of doing the oral as well remotely. There is the technology, so I'm not using it. I heard that's okay. I was thinking of applying for SQE1 and SQE2 exemption at the same time, but by the sounds of it, it is not a good idea. Can I apply for an SQE2 exemption before doing the SQE1? About applying for exemptions, what I've heard from people is that the SRA are not keen to grant exemption from both the SQE1 and the SQE2 exemptions. If you applied for both at the same time, how would you do that? You pass the LPC and you're a foreign qualified lawyer. I would probably, if I was doing that, advise to indicate to the SRA which, if they're only going to grant one, which one you would like most to be exempted from. Now, your supplement, can you apply for an exemption from the SQE2 exam before sitting the SQE1 exam? Yes, no problem with that. Ethel, another question for you. How far back could you go for your QWE? Nice, clear question. The answer is as far back as you want. But there may be practical problems in having it confirmed, because I've had people who said, the solicitor who saw my work has retired, has died. Okay, so they're dead. You're probably stuck there. If you're going to an external confirming solicitor, the external confirming solicitor will have to see the work and have to get feedback from the supervisor. And there may be practical considerations then, because if you left the organization a number of years ago, how are you going to be able to get them to give you permission to have the evidence, the work to show to the external confirming solicitor? And B, they may not even have it anyway. Because emails, for example, which often form a large part of the evidence that I'm doing when I'm confirming qualifying work experience, they may have been archived. So there are practical considerations. And if you're going to an external confirming solicitor, you can't access the work to show them, you may not be able to use that QWE, because we as external confirming solicitors have to answer questions to the SRA when we're doing the confirmation. Have you seen the work? Have you got feedback from the supervisor? Does the supervisor have any concern about your character or suitability for you being a solicitor? Now, if we can't get that evidence, I'm not going to lie to the SRA. I can't confirm that period at QWE. So I hope that's of some help there. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Lots of thanks in here. I'm looking for the next question. Okay, Justin, how does an SRA regulated solicitor confirm QWE that was acquired in South Africa? Okay, I can talk about this because I've done it. If the SRA regulated solicitor is in South Africa and saw you doing the work, easy. They saw the work. They would just, when you ask someone to confirm your qualifying work experience, you fill that in on your MySRA profile. The SRA will then email the solicitor asking them to click on a link to go and do the confirmation. So it's all done in the cloud, effectively. If you're going to an external confirming solicitor, the external confirming solicitor is required by the SRA, and have to say this when they're doing the confirmation, that they have seen the work and that they got feedback from the supervisor, and that the supervisor did not have any concerns about the character and or suitability of the aspiring solicitor becoming a solicitor. How do I do it? I do it via a Zoom call, and the aspiring solicitor will share their screen to show me the evidence. And there's a whole process that I go through with this, but quite careful in checking the evidence and also checking that it matches the competencies. So I always offer a free, no obligation Zoom where I go through what the process would be. So there's confidentiality and data protection maintained that way because the data never reaches my computer. We use Zoom and then usually use Zoom for getting the feedback from the supervisor as well. So I hope that answers your question, Justin. I'm very careful about data protection, privacy, confidentiality, but modern technology allows us to do stuff remotely. Christina, really good question. Does policing count as QWE? It could do. It depends. What a lawyer's answer. It depends. Is it the provision of legal services? Now, that isn't going to be catching Johnny who's been nicking some bottles of whiskey from the store or something like that. I think the contemplation of the SRA is that we're looking at the sort of work that a solicitor would do. And a solicitor won't be apprehending criminals, that sort of thing. However, if you're working as in-house legal, you're interpreting the law, advising people on that, and it could be on compliance, policies and procedures, data protection, anti-money laundering are things that jump to mind here. But if it's just regular policing, I don't think so. Right. Scrolling down for questions. Karin, my supervisor is not a solicitor and have worked for 3 years in welfare benefits law. She is willing to give feedback and have a portfolio of 18 competencies. Can this be confirmed by an external solicitor? It sounds as though it could be. Again, you said crucially, welfare benefits law. So it depends what you're doing. But if you're doing things like researching the law, gathering information in from clients, analyzing it, advising clients on the application of the law into their scenarios, those sorts of things there, that would be, in my view, qualifying work experience. If you were just training people on welfare benefits law, then I think I would struggle to try and squash it into the definition of the provision of legal services. But it seems as though you have the elements in place then for an external confirming solicitor to be able to do the confirmation. As I said, it is a service that we offer, but that's entirely up to you on that. I hope that's of some help. Looking for further questions? It doesn't look as though there are any further questions. Okay, so if you have follow-up questions or things that you want to ask or want to get in touch, by all means, email me or message me through LinkedIn. There's a form on the website as well. We have, as I said, an extensive list of videos on YouTube. So please do subscribe. If I can please ask you to do that, it will be fantastic. I'm trying to get the number of subscribers up. We even have a channel on TikTok. So yeah, QWE Help Ingemar was me. So lots of pictures of me for you, but I'll add that as well. So largely the same material I got on YouTube, but really just trying to spread this around so it helps people, basically. We've got another question. Is there an example of criteria table for QWE that a foreign lawyer's supervisor will have to complete? I'm just pausing because I'm slightly confused. A foreign lawyer is exempt from QWE. Okay. If you are not already qualified, I've reworked the SRA suggested form for qualifying work experience. This is not relevant to foreign lawyers because you're already qualified and you are exempt from qualifying work experience requirement. But for paralegals, say, then you've got the competencies. You can see I've reworked this a bit. So you've got numbers on them and such. And this is what I work through with the people when I'm doing confirming their qualifying work experience as an external confirming solicitor. If we go back to here, so I'm working around your question, Jose, in this one here, to exemption for foreign qualified lawyers. There are no particular criteria other than perhaps drafting of the guidance note. So if I open this up, if that will open up, there we go in Word. So you can do the same here. It's the reference letter. And there are these 6 points here which need to be covered. Okay. That's in the letter of reference. And then it's filling in the SRA form, which again, you could download from here. The form is the form. Okay. Now we do help people if they need having their hands held or reviewing what they've done. We do at that point charge because there's a limit to how much free information we can put out there. But I hope that's of some help, Jose. If you are a foreign qualified lawyer, don't worry about QWE. You are exempt. Okay. There is confusion because this terminology is quite similar, this professional legal work experience, but it's regarded differently from QWE, which is for paralegals. You be practicing, it's not required. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? If there are no further questions, I've got someone joining just as we're finishing. Oh dear. So if there are no further questions, then thank you very much. Do feel free to get in touch to, as I said, subscribe to the YouTube channel, the TikTok channel, and just let other people know the resources that are there and signpost them to me if I can help. I will put a post up tomorrow morning, which will have the links that I've been talking about in there so that you can then access those. Hopefully you've seen also that you can go and find them from the Hunnings Consultancy website as well, up there. Good luck, everyone. Pleasure working with you. And I'll be doing another of these probably in February next year. That will be at 12:30 p.m. UK lunchtime, because that will make it easier for people from the Middle East and the Far East, the Indian subcontinent and such to make, because I appreciate some of you, this is middle of the night, as in 3, 4 in the morning, something like that. Okay. Have a good evening, everyone.